I'll give you a brief intro and get out.
Okay, great.
I'll give you a brief. All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to your class today. I'm very, very excited. I was able to connect with JP Hawthorne from the Portland School of Astrology and found him willing to talk about signs today. And it's so great because I know that this is just going to be like a whole event. It's not just going to be like you're an Aries, good luck. You're going to really get to have a nice introduction and meeting with the signs. So I hope you guys will absolutely enjoy your class today and enjoy JP. And JP, it's all yours.
Thank you, Stormy. Thanks for having me, everybody. Good to see you. I'm JP Hawthorne. I am the founder of the Portland School of Astrology. We're in physical in-person school here in Portland, Oregon. We've got an event space, we've got a shop, we have a library, we have offices. It's kind of an astrology hub. That's the picture that you're seeing actually is in the teaching space. And today what we're doing is we're talking about the signs, one of the foundational pieces to learning astro. And I've had the distinct pleasure of bringing that to you today. Although it'll be a little bit of a challenge because I typically do this lecture in 6 hours. And so we're doing it in 2 hours. But I'm an Aries, Sun, Saturn, so I love a good challenge, especially if it's a race. But you'll still get a ton of great information about the signs. But I think that the signs, for me, actually, the signs are more interesting personally than the planets. I love the signs so much. I love looking at archetypes. I love listening to the radio and trying to identify a song as a particular sign. I love doing that with food. I love doing that with herbs. I like doing that with art in the museum. And when you open up your eye to this archetypal lens, it never ends. It's always ongoing, and you're constantly learning new layers about signs, right? The 12 signs, new things about the 12 signs. Once you develop that kind of astrologer's eye or archetypal eye. The signs, before we get started, let me just actually point out here that I do have a personal website, cosmophilia.com. That's my personal work. I've been seeing clients for over 10 years. We opened the school. This will be our 9th school year coming in. My personal work is I really love looking at the intersection between astrology and herbal medicine. I went to school for herbal medicine. I went to school for public health. And so empowering communities with the tools of both astrology and herbal medicine are really important to me. So if you want to check out my website, again, it's cosmophilia.com, cosmophilia.com. We've got a few products that are in stores across the country, but we sell them on our website. And the website for the Portland School of Astrology as well, which is pdxastro.org, pdxastro.org. And our Instagram is pdxastro as well. So you can follow us there, see what's up, see what's going on. We do a lot of programming for the public. We have free classes. We have classes open to the public. We have several cohorts of a 1st and 2nd year program. We do an annual conference every year. We've got digital downloads. We've got a publishing house. There's just a lot happening. So if you're interested in plugging in some way, again, pdxastro.org. Okay. Let me take a sip. So jumping into the signs, there's just a couple things I want to say before we actually get started. And the first is that what we're doing is looking at, again, the archetype of each sign. And so what we're not doing is talking about, your family member who is a Gemini or your ex-lover who is a Sagittarius. I think there's often the temptation to then try and fit the archetype of Sag into a person that you know who is Sag. And so again, what we're looking at is the archetype in its fullest. in the time allotted, of course. And what we're learning is about that archetype. And then the next lesson, right, is to put the planets on top. So what is Mars in Sagittarius, right? What is Moon in Gemini? How does the Moon express in a Gemini flavor? The second thing I want to bring to your attention about this is that to remind you that the signs are all of us, like, right? They're 12 universal human qualities that we all have encoded into our charts, right? So if we're not a Gemini moon and we're not a Mars in Sag, we're still going to have Sag somewhere in the chart, right? So if I'm Cancer rising, I have Sag in the sixth. So sixth house topics are going to be expressed in a Sagittarius way, even if I don't have planets there, right? So learning the signs is not only helpful in learning astrology, learning the signs is also helpful in understanding ourselves. Because again, the chart is the whole picture, it's the whole being, it's all the qualities that we have afforded to us, right? We're given those qualities. And so again, I invite you, if you don't have planets in a particular sign, still listen, still pay attention, still take notes, because then you can go to the chart, right? And say, oh, well, where is that sign? Oh, okay, it's in the ninth house. What is the ninth house? Okay, so I do ninth house topics in a Cancer way. So let me now begin to do some self-exploration and figure out in what ways do I do ninth house topics in a Cancer flavor, right? Okay. The other thing about the signs that we're going to do today is we're actually going to go by polarity. So we're going to do Aries, Libra, Taurus, Scorpio, Gemini, Sag, Cancer, Capricorn, Leo, Aquarius, Virgo, Pisces. And the reason why I like to do that is because the signs are sharing the same thread or the same urge or the same motivation, the same theme, but they express them in opposite ways, right? And so I like to go by polarity so that that's really easily distinguishable, right? You can see that really easily. However, if you come across a lecture on the signs or a book about the signs that goes in order, right? So order would be Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces. That's also really helpful too, because you'll begin to notice this kind of wave that happens, right? This kind of rhythm that happens where Aries does a lot of something and then Taurus kind of, I don't want to say corrects, but it's like it kind of makes up for the excess and then it's excessive in a different way. And then so Gemini makes up for that excessive Taurus, but is excessive in a different way, and et cetera. So it kind of goes in a wave, right? So learning the signs in order is also really helpful too, but I like to do it in this polarity way. Okay. All right. All right. So let's get started. So each sign has a little ditty. And so Aries ditty is I am. And we'll explore, as we go through each sign, each slide will have the ditty of each sign. But that's just meant to be a touchstone, right? Like a correspondence that is helpful in understanding the archetype of Aries, right? So Aries is largely learning about the world by learning about self, right? All right. So for each slide, we're going to talk about the core principles and then the shadow qualities of each sign, right? So we're not just going to pick on Aries, we're going to do the shadow qualities of each sign. But we're also going to talk about what's really wonderful and great about each sign. And one way that I like to start talking about the signs as of late is to introduce the season, right? The seasonality. And so Aries is the start of spring. And remember that the signs are seasons. They're not constellations. I'll actually repeat that because it's important and it's worth repeating. The signs aren't constellations, they're seasons. So seasonally, what we see in the world, what we see outside, is what we see in the chart, is what we see in behavior. And I also want to make a point to say that I grew up in Detroit. I've lived in Phoenix, Arizona. I live here in Portland now. And so all of those experiences, I saw typical seasonal expressions within each season, within each sign, right? So no matter where you live, you'll still see seasonal imprints of that sign. It's just up to you to try and find those. So some of the ones I'll be using will be specific to the Pacific Northwest, but it'll give you a good indication of what I'm talking about. So Aries season, the start of spring. Great. So the start of spring is marked by the reawakening of plants, right? And so we see the little spring greens shooting out from the ground, right? The little shoots and leaves and little tender seedlings, little babies that pop out, right? And so when that happens, what we see is a tenacity, of course, but also there's this vulnerability, there's this courage and vulnerability, right? It's like we're collecting all of this energy under the ground, we're shooting out these new spring greens, and then they're really open and vulnerable to being attacked, right? Like eaten, grazed upon, snowed on, trampled on. And so if that happens, then the plant just goes, oh, okay, we died. Great. Well, let's pull all this energy again. Whoop, send those new green shoots and leaves out again, those little spring greens. And if we die again, we'll just try again. So there's this energy again of tenacity with Aries. Also in Aries season, we see a lot of the reds pop out, right? So you will see plum leaves, which are reddish purple, maple, right? Some of these trees, they don't actually bud green, they bud red first, right? And so we see all the reds start to pop out in Aries season. Okay. All right. So Aries teaches us about courage, about passion, about creativity, about sparking initiation, right? Things, starting new things, doing new things, beginning new things. And I'll give you some examples of that too. Some chart examples, some student examples. They're really interested in newness. They're newness seeking, right? So for instance, I had an Aries moon partner for several years who would always become expired, right? Like, I'm always expired. We got to go. I'm expired. I'm expired. I'm expired. I'm expired. There's a comfort in the newness, right? For Aries moon. I have an Aries moon client who's a dog walker, right? And this is how you learn astrology, everybody. Just ask people why they do the things they do. So you're like, what about dog walking interests you, right? And so my dog walker Aries moon friend says, oh, well, I'm always in new neighborhoods. I'm always with new dogs. I'm always seeing new sights. Even if it's the same client, walking through the neighborhood is always going to be a different experience because of seasons, right? And it's always changing. So I find comfort in newness, right? I have a student who's an Aries moon who processes moon, emotional processing moon, by driving through new neighborhoods in Portland, right? So again, there's this movement and newness with Aries. Aries also has a sense of urgency too, right? There's like an urgency with Aries. Now, 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 now. Let's go, let's go, let's move, let's move. It might be why they're really suited well for work in which there is a certain amount of intensity or movement or pressure, right? So like catering or EMT work, for instance, things that are really movement oriented and have a lot of urgency. Okay. So Aries might also be willful emotionally, physically. There's a lot of energy behind Aries. There can be a lot of strength. There's also an instinctual nature with Aries. It's lit up in the gut, right? And the gut is the fire-based psychic center, right? The gut is the fire-based psychic center. And so it only says yes or no. And if you get a maybe, that is your brain getting involved. So it's usually safe to say that a maybe is a no until further notice. But the gut only gives us yes or no. It doesn't give us any information. And if we're getting information, that's something different, right? So if I'm signing a lease and my gut is saying, oh no, I don't think you should do that, then that's the fire-based psychic center, right? It's not giving us information why not to sign the lease. There's just something that's alarming us to that, right? So Aries is lit up in the animal body. So is Scorpio, the other Mars ruled sign. They're both lit up in the animal body. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay. All right. Oh no, shadow Aries. All right. Let's talk about anger for a moment. So Aries, fire sign, right? This sign is learning a lot about anger, about how to work with that emotion. And I know that astrology doesn't exist in a vacuum. And so it's really important when we're looking at the signs to also look at how the signs are expressed in our culture, how certain behaviors and attributes are um, praised or discouraged, right? And so it's probably not news to anybody watching that anger is an emotion that our culture tends to have a difficult time with, right? We see lots of toxic examples of anger, right? Like overly angry or angry for no reason, or just using anger to get what we want and just kind of throwing around our energy. And we also see the opposite, right? People who are afraid to express what they need, afraid to assert a boundary, afraid to say something, afraid to speak up. And so Aries is about working with anger. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions that Aries are angry a lot, or that they're combative, which can be true, but not always true, right? So we might see Aries who are afraid to express their anger or afraid to dip into that emotion. And just a reminder too that anger is one of the five core emotions, right? So the five core emotions, there are several kind of descriptors branching from that, but distilled down, there's five basic um, emotional states, right? And so anger is one of them, and it's really important that we engage that no matter what sign we are. But anger clears, it cleans, it starts over, right? So it's really important. So for Aries, we might see anger management might be an issue. And again, it can be overly angry or unable to express anger. Okay. So something that might be useful is asking oneself, is this the hill that you want to die on? Right? Because we might see that Aries, they might be very comfortable, right? Those who might be very comfortable throwing around their anger, it might not be worth it to constantly erupt or to constantly get angry over things. So sometimes that's an important question. Is this the hill that you want to die on? Because sometimes Aries can burn relationships because we're erupting over small things, or we're throwing around our anger again. We also might see selfishness or brash or abrasive qualities with Aries. Right, we might see a lack of decorum at times, and Aries is also crisis oriented. So this is also true of Scorpio. Both signs are crisis oriented. Again, they're both Mars ruled signs. So Aries tends to be crisis oriented externally, and Scorpio tends to be crisis oriented internally. So I'll actually give you an example. Um, so for Aries, it's really important that they are working their animal body out in an externalized way. So, again, kind of like doing work where urgency is important, right? Like catering and food service, running around, right? Where you're kind of moving back and forth. You're kind of in a crisis orientation externally. If we're not doing that regularly, then we create that for ourselves, right? So, this is kind of a classic example. Everyone probably has an understanding of this, but, it's my Aries moon clients, it's my Aries rising clients or students who, excuse me, they're like coming in 10 minutes late always. And they're like, they're putting themselves in situations that are forcing them to then have kind of extreme uh, bouts of urgency, right? Where they're kind of getting in the car or getting on the bus late. And then they're like, oh my God, am I gonna make it? It's the race, right? Which is so fun. So it's important for Aries. This is a remediation to make sure that we're actually working the animal body, that we're getting that crisis orientation out. Okay. So for Scorpio, and I know we're not quite there, but I want to drop this in now. So for Scorpio, that crisis orientation is internal rather than external, right? And so for Scorpio, they're the person on the bus, right, where another passenger boards the bus, and might glance at the Scorpio. And then the Scorpio is like, oh my God, why'd they look at me? What's happening? What, did they smile? Did they look mean? Are they going to kill me? I should get off the bus. Ding, 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 ding. There's more of an internalized crisis nature, right? The poker face. You can't tell, but it's all happening internally inside. One thing that I will say has been helpful for clients and students, like my Scorpio heavy, Aries prominent students, is sometimes like those students and clients say that running is really helpful. Like not everybody wants to run, not everybody can run, I understand, but those clients say that they run as if someone is trying to kill them. And so that's like a way in which their animal body really works out a lot of those. I don't know what that would be. Some biochemical, maybe somebody in the chat can say. But working out that kind of, working that animal body can be really helpful for expressing that crisis orientation so that we're being proactive about it rather than reactive about it. Okay. And then the last thing here, violence prone combative, that kind of goes with what I've said earlier. All right. Here's your Cosmo Kitty. Your Aries Cosmo Kitty. So I wanted to just drop in really quickly the rulership, right? So maybe, I can't remember if you've had planets yet in this series or not, but there are certain planets that like certain signs and certain planets that do not. Someone will probably talk to you about this, but it briefly stated, because planets are exalted or home, it does not mean that they're any better or good. And because planets are in fallen detriment, it doesn't mean that they're any worse or bad. When they're in fallen detriment, and actually that's languaging that you'll read. You'll read that online, you'll hear that in conferences, things like that, lectures. But I'm here to tell you it's not true. It's shitty astro. But what is true about planets in fallen detriment is that their nature is just antithetical to the nature of the sign, right? So Saturn being a slow and cold planet in a hot and fast sign only means that it just acts differently. There's an expectation that goes above, there's an action that goes above our expectations, right? Saturn's just doing something differently than we expect. Same with Venus, right? So like I said, I like to give lots of examples because my brain is like a file cabinet. And so I file away all of these kind of interesting tidbits, but I think they're really helpful to illustrate the signs, right? So Venus and Aries. I have a Venus and Aries friend, Taurus, Venus and Aries. We like to go hiking together. We like to go look at plants and things. I hope I can cuss on here. This is coming because this is an example. It's important. But my friend with Venus and Aries, Venus is about the beauty principle, or at least in this example. So my friend has this beauty principle that's actually quite assaulting, right? Aries. And so when we go out hiking, my friend is like, ah, fucking look at that sunset. And it's so disarming for me. I'm like, what? Okay, yes, I will. I will. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay. There's kind of, again, an abrasive beauty principle with Venus and Aries. So again, it doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that the beauty principle is just much more kind of bitey than Venus wouldn't be otherwise, right? Sometimes Venus is like, oh, look at that sunset. It's very beautiful, all the golds and reds and pinks. But a Venus and Aries is like, I said, look, right? Look at that. Yeah, okay. That's all I'll give you for now. Yeah, okay, okay. Also, I want to drop in the element, mode, and polarity. So it's cardinal fire. And at the Portland School of Astrology, we use the words onopheric and katapheric instead of masculine and feminine because we find those terms to be confusing and problematic. So we like to use the original Greek. So Aries is an onopheric sign, which means rising up, right? Rising up. You might, if you've had any exposure to biology, these prefixes are used in bio too. So anabolic processes build up. Anapheric elements move up. Catabolic processes break down. Catapheric signs move downward. So again, these are the words that we're using instead of the terms masculine and feminine. So for Aries in books or other resources, you might see it called masculine, but again, we use the word onopheric. Okay. And then we're going to end with some Aries people. So these are sun sign Aries. They don't necessarily exhibit the archetype of Aries, but again, just sun sign. Um, geez, we're already a half an hour in. We've done one sign. Like I said, it's going to be a race. Competition. Aries is motivated by competition. Okay. All right, so let's move on to Libra. And here's the season of Libra. This is actually, I Google image searched like early October outdoors or something like that. So this was a fundraiser, a picture from a fundraiser that happened in early October. I don't know what, but I just grabbed it from Google Images. Again, the seasonal imprint is part of the sign. And so for Libra, what we see is this very balanced and golden light. It's almost like there is an iridescence or a shimmer kind of on everything. And if you walk around, right, like the signs are also, there's also social or cultural pieces with the signs too. And so in Libra season, at least here in Portland, it's like every night is like a party. Every night feels like a Friday night. Not like in a summery kind of way, because that's very Leo, but it's like people are really enjoying the last of the nice weather before we're going indoors, so that everyone's kind of in groups or in pairs. They're cuffing season, they're cuffing, they're having happy hour. Libra season is also when the cultured beauty begins again, right? So arts, the symphony, the theater, all of those cultural institutions begin their schedule for the year, right? So, in October, the Portland Art Museum, for instance, will launch their 2021-2022 schedule, or the theater will do the same thing. So we see in Libra, cultured beauty is a huge piece to that sign as well. Okay. We also see like a lot of indoor social activity, like fundraisers, open houses, things like that. All right. So Libra, what I hear a lot in books, or like I said, a lot of astro spaces, people talk a lot about Libras. They talk in terms of marriage, in terms of romantic partnership. But I really want to expand that and say that Libra is actually about relationships to all things. All things. It's the webs in which we are connected to. So it's people, places, things, ideas. Libra is really interested in its and others' relationships to everything, right? So we see the Libra rising, who's like, wow, JP, you really like coffee, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I do. Thanks for noticing, right? And they're like, wow, JP, you really like pizza, right? And you're like, what do you mean by that? Oh, nothing. I'm just noticing that you're in a relationship with pizza, right? Or you really love Vegas or something like that. They notice that you have a relationship with place, with people, with things, with nouns, with ideas, right? So Libra is really curious about why people are in relationship to what they're in relationship to. What is the value of that personally, right? It's like, why do you like that thing? What do you get out of that? What kind of joy brings do you get from this relationship that you have to Frank Sinatra, right? So Libra is concerned with everything that we're connected to. And it's also a way in which this kind of relationship tending is the work of Libra. And I don't mean that in like a drudgery kind of way. Like Libra is really interested in maintaining these relationships, right? Again, not just with people. And so Libra in some ways builds a lot of social capital. So a lot of my clients who are artists and have a lot of Libra prominent, they come and they talk about this. This is where I've learned this idea, where a lot of Libra prominent artists get a lot of work. And in our culture where art is devalued, there's not a lot of funding, there's not a lot of resources in art. That Libran quality becomes really important because they're maintaining a lot of relationships, which means that they're kind of staying fresh in people's minds or organizations' minds, and then they're selected for certain projects. So sometimes like that Libran job of building relationships and maintaining relationships does afford them a certain amount of social capital. Okay. So what we see about Libra, we might read in books and blogs. Libra's about harmony and peace and balance, which is true, but often at the expense of its own internal nature. So one of the books that we make our first years read, and the program is the Stephen Forrest Inner Sky. And what he writes about Libra is this analogy of equating Libra with the violin. And so we hear the violin and it creates such beautiful Libran music, right? But it's at the it's actually at the expense of the instrument, right? Like the strings are pulled so taut, so tight, and that's what actually creates this very harmonic sound. And if you ever had middle school band and remember taking care of an instrument, it was very temperamental, right? Like it couldn't be hot, it couldn't be cold, it couldn't be in a locker, it couldn't be carried around, it couldn't be in a car, it couldn't be in your house. So there's a lot of uh, very hard to strike balance, right? And even taking care of an instrument. But what I really like about that analogy is, again, there's that outward expression of harmony, right? We see that with Libras, like, oh, wow, they're so balanced, they're so peaceful. But it's at the expense of that internal stress. So Aries and Libra, stress response becomes really important. I had to cut the physical and mental, emotional slides for Aries for this lecture, but just a quick tidbit, the stress response is really important. Stress management for both these signs is really important. So Libra is really like often in a stressful internal nature in order to create harmony. They often do this kind of environment tending. They're kind of running around and fluffing things, right? Like I'm at work and someone says something passive aggressive. I'm all, oh, fluff, 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 fluff. Oh, this person's a little sad today. Fluff, 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 fluff. Oh, this person's a little angry. Fluff, 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 fluff. There's a lot of environment tending that Libra does, right? And that's important to know, especially not just at work, but it's important to know with family or with friends or with group housing situations. In what way does a Libra prominent person believe it's their responsibility to kind of keep the environment harmonious at the personal expense of Libra? All right, got to move on. So aesthetics and looks oriented, this can be true, but I don't want you to think that, we've got these pictures of people with a bouquet and we've got these pictures of people in a really refined, beautiful setting, eating cakes, I think. That's often the images that we see for Libra, but aesthetics and looks orientation for Libra can be whatever it is. If a Libra really loves overhead lighting, fluorescent lighting, then they love it, right? It's about their personal looks and aesthetics that's important. So it doesn't look the same, obviously. Same with music, right? We often like equate very kind of symphonic sounds with Libra, but I've known too many, metal loving Libras, hip hop loving Libras, things that have much more of a driving beat. It just depends on what the Libra needs to feel grounded, right? It's going to look different for everybody. Again, there's a concern with cultural beauty. So Libra is a sign that is ruled by Venus. The other Venus ruled sign is Taurus, which we're going to go to shortly. And Taurus is about earth beauty. Libra is about cultural beauty. So the humanities, art, music, theater, novels, poetry, poems. I guess poetry and poems are the same, but the ways in which we express life, right? What we are in relationship to. Libra's really interested again in how relationships are reflected in this, and learns a lot about the self by connecting with the cultured beauty. All right. And then last, decisions reflect the good for all, not for one, promotes interdependence and cooperation. Okay, that's self-explanatory, I guess. Let's move on to the shadow qualities of Lib. Playing devil's advocate to achieve balance, contrary or combative. So this can be true. We might think of like maybe a Libra sitting on a nonprofit board and we're throwing a fundraiser, right? So everyone's like, let's do Saturday the 7th, right? And they're like, yeah, Saturday the 7th. Yeah. Everybody's in consensus. Saturday the 7th, Saturday the 7th. But the Libra might go, oh, excuse me, what about Saturday the 14th? So there's a way in which Libra sometimes creates disharmony in order to achieve a greater harmony, right? Or challenging, kind of playing devil's advocate, kind of playing the other side or playing the other role, which might seem contrary or combative, but it's really at the expense, or excuse me, it's really at the we're trying to strive for a greater, higher balance, a greater, higher harmony. So it's like, let me interrogate that thought. Let me think about that. Let me ask these questions, which might seem combative, but I really want to make sure that you've thought this out. I want to get everything out of this that I can. We might also see a preoccupation with presentation, appearance, and aesthetics. That might be true. Libra is a sign that is intellectual yet romantic. So we might tend to overly romanticize relationships to people, places, things, and ideas. So the Libra might, have an idea about what their job will look like, right? And then when they get a new job, it doesn't quite look the way they imagine it to be. And so there might be a disappointment that settles in. Oh no, I really romanticized what my house would look like when I finally had one, right? Or my room or something like that. This relationship, right? This love relationship, but it doesn't quite look like that. So I might be disappointed by having overly romanticized this idea. Just level setting expectation, check-ins, things like that might be helpful. Conflict avoidance, sacrificing self in order to achieve a greater harmony. This might be true. We often hear about Libras being lazy. It might be related to the indecision paralysis that might settle in for Libra. I used to teach a class about each sign during the season of the sign. And for Libra, what we did for that group was we would make cootie catchers. Are people familiar with cootie catchers? It's basically just like a divination tool. So Libra would ask a question and then do the cootie catcher and pull the flap back. But tools like that can be really helpful for Libra. I'm not a Libra, but it's still helpful to have like a magic 8-ball app on my phone, because what those tools do is it reflects a answer, and then Libra can decide what's true or not. So even if you're like, I want to buy a car, should I buy a car, magic 8-ball? And it says, no, don't buy a car. The Libra won't necessarily go, okay, the magic 8-ball like knows all. But it'll actually provoke a thought journey, a thought trajectory. They're like, wait, they say no, but like, do I really need a car? Like, let me think about this. It's a tool that really helps to mirror back to them what they might need mirrored to them. Speaking of mirroring, we're running out of time, so I can't talk about this too much, but things that mirror are really important. When it comes to the magical jobs of signs, Libra does a lot of mirror magic, which maybe you can look up online. Talk therapy is a type of mirroring that's really important for Libras to engage in that kind of process, even if it's just with a friend, but kind of, again, mirroring back. Libra moons, right? Feeling or understanding how people feel about something first, maybe before sharing how I feel, right? Like, hey, what do you think of our boss? Oh, what? You don't like our boss either? Great, neither do I. Let me tell you everything. There's this kind of mirroring behavior that Libra has. Okay. So Libra, our rulership, the sun is in fall, Mars is in detriment, Saturn is exalted, and Venus is at home. Cardinal air, anaphoric moving upwards, air and fire move up. And Mars in Libra is a fun one, because Mars in Libra, often won't, and again, this is not always true, but Mars in Libra might not stand up for itself, but it'll stand up for the group, right? So it's like if someone cuts in front of the line in front of a Mars in Libra, they might not say anything. But if someone cuts in front of the line in front of a group of people in which Mars in Libra is part of, they're going to be like, hey, back of the line, buddy. Because they are compelled to stand up for others, right? The group rather than the individual or the self. Okay. And so that's why, again, we say these planets are in detriment, because they're not acting as we expect, right? Mars is fighting for others in the group. It's not necessarily, again, this isn't always true, depends on the chart, but it's not going to necessarily stand up for self as quickly, okay? And then we're going to end with some Libra folks. Libs peeps. Some Libs peeps. Okay, better with time. I got that one, I think, in 12 minutes. I think I have to get it down to 8 minutes per sign. Something like that. Okay. Taurus, that's the ditty for Taurus. Taurus is about having actually, well, this is part of the slide, so I swear I'm getting to something that's already there. If we think about Taurus and Scorpio, Scorpio is the opposite sign of Taurus. If we think about those two signs incarnating in a body, right? Taurus is like, oh, I'm on Earth again. So, what are all the beautiful things of Earth that I could have in my arms, on my body, in my house? Right? It's like I want all the beautiful things of Earth just surrounding me all the time. And so this is where sometimes we see like pack ratting, pack rat behavior with Taurus. And Scorpio, I know we're not there yet, but it's sometimes helpful to hear a distinction of both signs at the same time. So for Scorpio, their orientation to coming, this idea of coming into a body, being reborn, they're like, oh, I'm in a body, I'm on Earth. So why have anything? Right? Like I'm just gonna die at any moment. So why have a couch? Why have a job? Sometimes, right? There's an orientation with Taurus that, or excuse me, with Scorpio that's much more kind of risk oriented. They don't want to be tied down to so many things. Both signs, right, see the temporariness of life on Earth, but they have a different reaction. So Taurus is like, give me all the beautiful things of Earth so I can be surrounded by them at all times. And then Scorpio's like, I don't want any of that shit, right? I don't want any of that. I've got a job to do. I've got things to do. I've got a life to live, right? Okay. So moving on to the core principles of Taurus. The season, mid-spring, it's the fixed expression of spring. We've got the cross-quarter holiday of Beltane that happens in Taurus. So it's when, the trees are the greenest, the grass is the greenest. It's like neon green. And it's cold to the touch. Oh, feels so good. All the flowers are at their juiciest and sexiest, right? It's that beautiful expression. And we just come out of Taurus season. We're now in Gemini. But Taurus, again, is that kind of fixed expression of spring where we sit out on a park on a blanket and we're eating, little crudités and little charcuterie boards, little snackies, right? Cheese and crackers and maybe White Claws today, wine, a little beverage, something like that. We're just enjoying the moment. It's a very presence-oriented sign. And in fact, I call that the polarity of Taurus Scorpio, the axis of presence. And I don't mean present as in like gifts, but presence as in present of mind, presence. And so Taurus is that energy of, a bull eating grass for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or, the energy of like grandparents on a rocking chair on the front porch, like drinking lemonade in the sunset, right? And the moment just goes on and on and on and on and on. And we might have moments of observation, of noticing. It's very Taurus, just like, oh, look, there's crabgrass over there, you know? And we're like, oh, the neighbor needs to wash his truck. We're just kind of like in the moment, we're presencing. So Taurus is that energy. With Taurus, there's like an endurance or a steadfastness. There's a patience, a slowness, a slow burning, right, experience with Taurus. I have Mercury in Taurus. So it's like the way I talk, you might not know this. It's because I've said this lecture like 25 times, but Mercury in Taurus is kind of slow to process or slow to speak. A lot of my students make fun of me because if someone says something funny, everybody will laugh. And then you'll hear me laugh after everybody. So it's like Mercury in Taurus is just a little bit slow. It's a little bit patient. Taurus might recognize the earthly pleasures, appreciating the body, senses the bodies, anything that is worn on the body, things that are body oriented, smells, tastes, touch, right? Very Taurus. And ritual and routine oriented. This is important to remember. So for instance, like I have a lot of planets in Taurus, but they're in the ninth house. And so a lot of times people are like, oh, you have a packed ninth house, you love to travel. No, I don't like to travel because it's Taurus. And so when I travel, it disrupts a lot of my routines. And so that is an impediment for me to travel. But if I do travel, then I've got to make sure that those routines are still being done, but wherever it is I travel to. So that kind of ritual, that routine orientedness is really important for Taurus. We feel very grounded, very safe, very centered by this. Okay. All right. Taurus is also about abundance, and the opposite of abundance is scarcity. So we might see Tauruses, even in the same day, right, do this thing where they're like, we're at brunch, it's very lavish, let me treat everybody, let me give a good tip. And then for dinner, it's top ramen. Right? Like we might see Tauruses kind of oscillate between generosity and lavishness, and this idea that resources are infinite and things must flow, all the way to like, oh my gosh, I can't spend any money on myself. I can't give any money to anybody else. I don't have anything to give. There might be this kind of, again, scarcity mentality or even hoarding mentality for Taurus. Excessive security, excessive comfort, stability seeking. Taurus might hold on to what's outdated, relationships, homes, repurposed items. Sometimes marketers would refer to the Taurus archetype as late adapters, because sometimes, again, we're kind of slow to incorporate new things into our lives. um, because we like what's been working for us. We might see materialism, too many possessions. Sometimes Taurus is, really into its comforts, and sometimes that's actually a hindrance too to try new things. It might even be a hindrance on relationships too. I think about, for instance, like with my nieces and nephews who play t-ball or whatever, little league. Okay. And they're, my brothers are like, come see your nephews and nieces play little league. And I'm like, oh man, those benches are so uncomfortable. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, there's no concession stand. Where am I going to pee? What if it's cold? So sometimes that comfort seekingness of Taurus can be a hindrance, right? And in fact, I'm a true Taurus moon. I'm in my kitchen, and I even have my bed in my kitchen. Look at that. Okay, very Taurus. All right. I want to be very comfortable when I'm doing dishes. All right. So let's move on to the Cosmo Kitty, the Taurus Cosmo Kitty, fixed Earth, Catapheric, Mars and Taurus. So again, thinking of detriment and fall, not as bad, but just unexpected. So Mars, hot and fast, and a slow and cold sign. Okay. All right. And then we've got our Taurus peeps, our Taurus. Look at, actually, I love this picture of Janet Jackson in the corner. Scorpio rising, Taurus sun. That picture is so Taurus Scorpio. Look, you see the lavish cakes, the rose, the patterned sofa behind her, but she's wearing all of this red and black Scorpio colors, these spiked cuffs, Scorpio, drinking tea. If you're able, you can also take a screenshot of this too, if you're curious about these people, if you know how to do that on your computer. All right, we're going to keep going. Scorpio, I desire. Um, yeah, actually, let me just, because desire will be in here. The core principles of Scorpio. So where Taurus is about holding on, Scorpio is about letting go. Scorpio really understands that thermodynamic principle. I think it's number 3, that energy cannot be created nor destroyed, that it just is transmuted or changed or transformed, and really understands that, their life is an embodiment of that principle, right? That they are temporarily themselves, right? They're temporarily in a body, they're temporarily here on Earth. That everything changes, right? Anyone ever date a Scorpio? I did for 8 years. Um, Scorpio, and I have actually, being a Taurus moon, all of my 5 best friends are all Scorpio moons. I have a lot of Scorpio examples. But for Scorpio, they really see their relationships, things that they're involved in, their families, whatever it might be, as energy that is constantly needing to be transmuted or changed. So, like when we date a Scorpio, or when a Scorpio dates, they kind of, and then they break up. They go through a process of, right, like kind of transmuting that energy. And then what often happens, as Scorpios report, is that things that they emotionally process, they come back. They come back a number of years later, or months or days or whatever it might be. It just comes back. And so then here they are, processing a relationship from 10 years ago, and they're going back inside, and they're mulling it about, and they're moving it around, and they're like looking for a new gem of healing that they might have missed, or something that they might not have fully integrated or processed before. Um, and so that's actually part of the healing of Scorpio. That's part of how the Scorpio heals. They're really doing this big magical job for the world, because a lot of Scorpios, maybe with Scorpios that have a lot of global oriented uh, planets and global oriented signs, they might do that for the culture at large. Kind of transmutate and change and look at what we're not looking at, looking at what's being swept under the rug, etc. So, Scorpios is often an energy in which they are kind of excavating and excavating and excavating and digging deep, getting down deeper into other layers. Okay. Transformation and understanding of death processes, holding the mystery, unknown, sexuality, projection. I think there are 3 signs that get a lot of sign bashing, and I think Scorpio is one of them. I'm sure you agree. And Scorpio, there's a couple of reasons. Again, astrology does not exist in a vacuum. So a lot of the sign bashing comes from our own, culture or societal view of the energy of this sign. And so for Scorpio, sexuality, obviously, our culture has a big problem with sexuality, especially who can and cannot be in their sexual authority, be in their sexual nature. Scorpio is also about relationship to power. And so we, again, as a culture, have an idea of who can and cannot exercise power. So just an example, being a Scorpio is going to be a very different experience for a cis straight white man than it is for a trans Black woman, for instance. So, again, our culture has different ideas about who can and cannot do some of these scorpionic attributes. Scorpio is also about being in the mystery or the unknown or the gray. And so, again, our culture has a problem with things that we don't understand or cannot label or don't uh, uh, I guess don't understand, but we have an idea that, like, if we've labeled something or categorized something, then that thing can never change too. So it's kind of in our nature to define and then to keep that thing defined in its box. And so Scorpio is kind of above that. They're like, screw that bullshit. No, I'm undefinable. I'm in the gray. I'm like this. I'm like that. You don't know me. You don't know me. And so again, sometimes we have a problem with that. Scorpio is also about the manipulation of energy. And when I say manipulation, often people have a negative connotation of that word, but I'm manipulating this coffee mug right now because I'm lifting it up. And so Scorpio is just really great at kind of noticing what's happening underneath, right? They walk into a party and they're like, what's really going on over here? They're like, oh, those 2 people, they're in a fight. Oh, there's some tension going on over here. Oh, there's some grief happening over here. They can kind of notice what's energetically happening, right? And we might, as Scorpio, we might kind of energetically move or craft or influence a certain situation. And again, it's not necessarily bad or wrong. I might be at a party and go, oh, nobody's talking to that person over there. Let me kind of like energetically like open up my body language. Let me try and fold that person into the party. So again, it's not necessarily bad, but this is what Scorpio does. It's the job of Scorpio is to be able to see what's happening energetically and move that, alter that, change that, adjust that. And lastly, the season of Scorpio is Samhain, right? Day of the Dead, Halloween, that time. So late October through mid-November. It's the season of ancestor worship, right? In more agrarian societies and more traditional times, This is when we would not harvest, we would leave the crops. We'd be like, okay, we're done harvesting. Anything that's not harvested would be left for the earth, right? The let's just use the apple. The apple would drop from the tree. It would begin to compost and break down. It would feed the earth. And there was also a belief that it would feed the ancestors, that the essence of the apple would also feed the ancestors. So it's that season of compost magic. It's that season of ancestor honoring. It's also the season of mystery too, right? So you think more about traditional times, or again in more agrarian communities, well, less so today, but in that season we might have some fear about the winter. We don't know if we've harvested enough food. We don't know if we have enough medicine. We don't know if somebody will become sick and die. We don't know what the weather will be like. So in Scorpio season, there was a little bit of like, I don't know, right? We're speculating, we're in mystery. We might even be a little bit nervous about coming through the dark half of the year, right? It's that initiation, that gate into the dark half of the year. Okay. So for shadow scorps, oh, is there a chat? Okay. Okay, great. Thanks, Stormy. Shadow Scorp. Okay, so crisis oriented, we talked about that. We also might see self-destructive behaviors of Scorpio, self-sabotage, fear of change. So we talked about Scorpio as being oriented to change, but we might also see a fear of change. They might be afraid of moving, changing, doing something extreme. We also might see extreme tendencies for change. So for instance, like I said, I have 5 Scorpio moon best friends, Scorpio clients, Scorpio students, a lot of file case examples in my brain. I have a Scorpio moon client who she doesn't like to clean her house. So when her house gets so dirty, she just moves houses. So instead of paying a company to come in, twice a week or once a month to come clean her house, she just moves houses. I have another Scorpio moon client with Venus and Taurus opposite. And so this client buys a bunch of shoes, Venus and Taurus, and then gets rid of them all. Scorpio moon gets rid of them all. And she's actually done that several times. And I think that she's like declared bankruptcy and as a result, a couple of times. So kind of amasses a large collection of shoes and then gets rid of them all. So it's very Taurus, amass, Scorpio, get rid of. Okay. We might see manipulation for personal gain, collecting secrets for later use, right? Because you never know. Like again, Scorpio and Aries, the Mars ruled signs, think of Mars as like the god of war. Like Scorpio and Aries, we never know when we have to go to war. So Scorpio is a little bit more strategic about it, right? So it's like if I see my boss do something that's a little below board, I guess, not above board, I might go, I'm going to take that and put that in my mind folder for later, because you never know when you might need to use that, right? Where maybe then the boss doesn't stick up for you or wants to get rid of you. Well, then you've got ammunition, you've got something to fight with, right? So I don't necessarily think this is wrong or bad, but we might see Scorpio again kind of collect secrets or put things into their file cabinet for use later. It's a way that it fights. It's a way that it defends itself and protects. So it's not necessarily bad. Intense contemplation of painful events, death, sex, power. Excuse me. So like I said, that kind of excavating energy that I mentioned earlier. And power struggles, again, I kind of mentioned that earlier too. Scorpio might tend to attract a lot of power struggles because Scorpio is in its authority, or that's the invitation of that energy, is to step into one's power and authority. And so that might attract, again, people who don't believe that you should be in your power or authority, and will challenge that. Okay. So no exaltation. Mars is at home, the fall, moon, and detriment Venus. Fixed water in contiferic, which means, again, moving downwards. And then last, we've got our Scorps people. Okay, we got 1 hour and what, 8 signs to do? Jeez, it's all right. It's all right. It's all right. Like I said, I usually do this lecture in 6 hours. I've had to cut a lot of slides out. It's a lot to do. All right. Like I said, the signs are just so vast and deep and big, and there's so much to them. Um, all right. So, Jem, I think, is the slide really busy? It is, but for a reason. So, so Gemini, the season of Gemini is actually right now. We're in Gemini currently. In Gemini season, what we see is the pollinators are at their height, right? The bees, the flies, the ants. In Gemini season, this is when the ants all come into my house. The other time they come into my house is Virgo season, the other Mercury ruled sign. In Gemini, what we also see is a lot of like wildflowers and variegated flowers, things that are kind of multicolored come up during Gemini season. And sometimes what we see too is a variation in weather. The mutable signs, we might see a weather variation because we're moving from one season into the next, right? Also in Gemini season, usually here, again, this might be a characteristic of where I live. I can't remember if this is true in other places, but the mutable signs often have pink and blue sunsets. So Gemini, pink and blue, pink and blue. Pisces, pink and blue, pink and blue. Sagittarius, pink and blue and purple. There's a little bit more purple in that one. And then Virgo, pink and blue and gold. There's a little bit more orangey gold in that Virgo's sunset. But Gemini, we also see like squirrels, land mammals, the crows. I see the crows. I see the birds. They're all kind of collecting, right? They're like collecting materials. They're collecting food. They're all about gathering their tools. And they do this also in Virgo, the other Mercury ruled sign too, because they're preparing for winter in Virgo. Okay. So again, that's the season of Gemini. The nature is curious, open, questioning, adaptable, restless, movement oriented, right? Asking questions, being curious, leaning into play, into lingual abilities. We see a lot of linguality with Geminis. A lot of our funny and entertaining internet words are probably from Geminis because, again, they like to play with language. They're idea driven, they're information driven, they're experience seeking. And I wrote here polymathic because a lot of times we think of Gemini as being a jack of all trades, master of none, which could be true. But I think that Gemini is another sign that gets a little bit of sign bashing. Like I said, I think there's three that get a lot compared to the other signs. So Gemini is one of them. And I think that has to do with our culture's expectation to specialize when Gemini is a generalist. Gemini is a generalist. I actually think that bears repeating. They're a generalist, right? Like they love to do everything. They know a little bit about everything. They might be well tasked to do many different kinds of jobs because they'll know how to educate themselves and get it done. I think about like personal assistants, right? Who might have such a wide variety of tasks and jobs that they do for an individual or an organization. And they're really well suited to that kind of generalist work. Right. So I want to reframe that kind of jack of all trades, master of none, and talk about it more as a polymath, right? They're polymaths, right? And polymaths are like, you ever look in an encyclopedia of like someone from the Renaissance? They were a painter, they were a doctor, they were a scientist, they were an astronomer, they were a priest, they were a librarian. They kind of did everything. That's a polymath. And that's very Gemini. Okay. Geminis are also shapeshifters within information. So often it feels like the curiosity of Gemini is frivolous or unwanted, or like we can't quite see like why they ask all of these questions, or they're curious in all of this information. I'm like, hey, what's your name? And like, what road did you take to get here this morning? And like, what were your parents' middle names? And what was your favorite record in high school? And there's like a lot of kind of that seemingly unconnected information gathering that Gemini does. But Gemini, again, is kind of a shapeshifter within that information. So they'll end up using it. You'll be in LA and you'll be at like a screenwriters guild party. And you're like, well, what do I know about screenwriting? Well, there's the writer's strike in 89 and the writer's strike in 09. Maybe I could talk about that. It's because, again, Gemini kind of collects all of the seemingly random information, but it will use it. It makes sense of the world through the information it's collected, right? Maybe I'm like, oh, I've asked a lot of white girls from born in the 70s through the mid 80s what their middle names were, and their middle names were Elizabeth and Marie. So I'm building a profile about the people who have those middle names at that time in the world. Again, there's just like information connecting about the world that I do when I'm asking these kind of seemingly random questions. And it's ways in which Gemini can kind of transform or change themselves to be in certain places or within certain communities and still have something to connect with, still have something to network on, still gather and collect even more information. Often that's why maybe Gemini's might get gigs or jobs. It's because you're showing a proficiency in a topic only because you went down a Wikipedia rabbit hole, right? Okay. Oops, that says multi-taking. I meant to say multitasking on the slide. Um, it's been there for years. I keep forgetting to change that. So with Gemini, we might see fast minds, fast talking, multitasking is what I meant to say. Multi-taking. Maybe that's true too. Social, exchanging information by asking questions, offering information about oneself. All right. So shadow gem. It's unfortunate, but a lot of these characteristics about Shadow Gemini are really were very easily seen and on display with our former president, DJT. A lot of these shadow qualities we saw regularly, daily. So trickster energy, that kind of lying or truth emitting to oneself or to others, kind of gaslighting. I think about a friend of mine in high school who's a Gemini, and I was a vegetarian for 20 years. And so, she'd be like, let's go to Outback Steakhouse. And I'm like, what? Like, there's nothing we can eat there. I can eat at Outback Steakhouse. I'm a vegetarian. And she'd be like, oh, yeah, no, you can eat there. Like, they have vegetarian stuff, like, totally. Right. And then you go to Outback Steakhouse, and the only thing that is vegetarian is that blooming onion. And you're like, guess I'm having an onion for dinner. So it's like it's not a lie, but it is kind of truth bending, right? It's like truth crafting, right? For Gemini, that can be true. That can also be important to remember for Gemini. Like a Gemini moon, for instance, and the ways in which we might emotionally process information might be helped by talk therapy, or I have a conversation with someone that might be kind of emotionally challenging. And then after we're finished, kind of revisiting the conversation verbally. Like, this is what happened. This was what was said. Here's the outcome of that. Just to be clear, because sometimes a Gemini, kind of moving out of that space, moving out of that emotional space, I might then begin to create language or internal dialogues of things that didn't happen. Gemini is so extra sensory perceptive that, if you're saying one thing, but you're kind of shifting your weight in a particular way, Gemini kind of sees that and adds that to the conversation. And so they might be like, well, they said this thing, but they kind of did this other thing, which makes me think that maybe they don't actually mean what they say. And that kind of processing just happens automatically. So it's not even like a decision-making process. So sometimes having a reflection, a mirroring, similar with Libra, for Gemini, that might be very helpful. Here's what happened in this work meeting from my perspective. Is that true, coworker? Like, was that true? Is that what your experience of what happened? Just kind of checking outside of oneself. All right. Consumed in news, information, the rest of the life suffers. This has been the case for Gemini and Aquarius clients for the last several years, being really burnt out in news and information, especially with the times that we've recently went through, still in. we're kind of addicted to doom scrolling and those kinds of things. So information fasting might be really important for Gemini and Aquarius. And information fasting does not mean no news or no information. It just means a boundary on the consumption of information that you're taking in. Boredom that might lead to acting out, excessive talking, damaging gossip, slander, superficiality, unable to stay on one subject, one relationship, one job. There might be an extreme need for freedom. This is also shared by Sagittarius, the opposite sign. And of course, with with Gemini, the word might become useless, right? If we are truth emitting or truth bending, saying that we're going to be there and then we're not there, then what we say might become untrustworthy. Okay. So Mercury is at home, Jupiter is in detriment. It's a mutable air sign and it's onophoric, which means moving up. All right. And then our Gemini people, Gem peeps. All right, and I'm going to move on for the interest of time. So we've got Sagittarius, I understand. So Gem is, I think, Sag is, I understand. All right. So the season of Sagittarius is late fall, so that kind of late November through mid-December time. And here in the US, that is the time of Thanksgiving. It's the time of often Hanukkah, the lead up to Christmas. Excuse me. And so in Sagittarius, there's a season of celebration. There's a season of or there's the energy of gift giving, of joy, of laughter, of storytelling, of music listening, of celebration, right? Anyone have to read the Little House on the Prairie books in school, like I did? And so they would say, in this season, Paul would put down his plowing instruments. He would stop working the fields and he would come indoors and we would like play the fiddle and we would laugh and dance and sing and tell stories and jokes. And there would be kind of a celebration experience in that season. Again, because there were no fields to work, right? So Sag is that energy of celebrating the year, of celebrating the bounty, of celebrating the harvest. And again, that kind of season today, currently, gift giving, parties, gregariousness, maybe overindulgence, right? This is a season of Sag. There's often beliefs, there's belief orientedness. There might be a spiritual element to that sign too. Okay. So Sag is about seeking knowledge outside of one's own understanding and expanding awareness, meaning making. The bush is on fire. What does it mean? Sag is about finding meaning, about making meaning, right? Sometimes we might see in books that astrology is given to Sagittarius. I actually think astrology lives in every single sign. But this is why, because Sag is about taking data and then creating meaning from that data, where Gemini is about collecting data for data's sake, right? I'm like, okay, the number one song in December 1965 is Turn, Turn, Turn by the Byrds. Okay, it's a fact I've memorized. But what does that mean? That's Sag. Like, what does that say about that year? What does that say about that time, about the people listening to the music? That's what Sag is interested in, the meaning. Okay. Freedom-loving, adventure-seeking, philosopher, truth collectors, right? This is what Sag does. They're like, wow, tell me about you. Tell me about your life. Tell me about the beliefs you have and why you have those. And for Sag, questing can be mental or physical. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if you've got 20 planets in Sagittarius that you love to travel. That's not true necessarily. But the questing could be mental, right? Like you love reading, you love watching documentaries, you love learning languages, you love eating foods from around the world. Again, that kind of questing is not limited to physical movement or travel. Okay. And for Sag, it's about the balance of intellect and intuition, right? A lot of Sagittarius have the experience of knowing before they actually know. because they're marrying that kind of gut brain axis, which we'll talk about with Virgo too. But they're kind of getting an intuition and then backing it up intellectually. Okay. And for Sag, faith can take 1,000 forms. I see this a lot where people are like, oh, Sagittarius, they're religious, they're religious, they're religious. That's not always the case. Sag is about beliefs, it's about faith, but people have faith and belief in so many other things other than religion. So people might, Sagittarius might have faith in law, they might have faith in family, they might have faith in money, they might have faith in science, they might have faith in the political system. They might have faith that the sun will rise every day. So Sagittarius is not necessarily oriented to religion, organized religion, spirituality, but it is organized to faith and belief, right? So people have faith and belief in many different things. That's an important distinction. And joke tellers, joyful, that could be true of Sag. All right. Oh no, shadow Sag. It's the dogmatic Cosmo Kitty. All right. So what we might see with Sag, though, is a belief that then becomes kind of locked or fixed, right? Where Sag is about seeking truth. And so sometimes a Sag might find a particular truth and then become very kind of locked or dogmatic about it. So then they're like, I found the one true truth. And so now I will proselytize that truth, and no one outside of this truth can be true. Nothing outside of this truth can be true. So we might see that kind of, again, proselytizing energy. I think of Pat Robertson as a great example, the host of the 700 Club, locked into dogmatic thinking or one-way spiritual philosophies, overly or falsely enthusiastic. Sag, again, kind of might lack unrealistic frameworks or grounding, right? They're like, I'm gonna go and travel the whole US. I'm just gonna hitchhike a ride and go all around the country, and I'm not gonna plan my food or my clothing or my showers. And you're like, okay, buddy, like, hold up, you're 7 years old. So you're not doing any of that. So there can be this unrealisticness to Sag, which might be a shadow quality, but it also really, in my opinion, I think it's also kind of a strength of Sag too, because they'll just figure it out. They're like, yeah, I'm not planning for my food or my showers, but like, I'll just figure it out, right? And in some ways, again, this isn't necessarily bad, but there can be, again, kind of an overly enthusiastic nature to Sag. I also think about this in terms of work too, the busy trap. Something that the New York Times talked about recently. It's very Sag, kind of involving yourself in so many things, right? Sitting on lots of boards, doing lots of school programs, working many jobs at once. Sometimes the Sag just kind of adds on, adds on, adds on, adds on, and overloads. And they're kind of overly enthusiastic, right? They're like, yeah, I can do it. Yeah, I can add another one. Yeah, that sounds great. Let me try. Let me be a cheerleader about this. And so sometimes, again, kind of checking in on the reality of what you're putting in the hopper, what you're putting in the queue, can be a helpful reflection, right? Like reflective question to self, right? Am I doing too much? All right. Blind to reality or trusting in the experiences of self or others, a need to be right, self-righteous, running away, freedom seeking. Again, with Gemini and Sag, there's that freedom questing theme that the two signs share. Unable to hold job, relationship, commitment. I mean, look at this unrealistic Cosmo Kitty. Heading to the moon with just a bag of sausages, that is not enough. Little Sagittarius cat. So like Gemini, the slide is actually flipped. So Jupiter is at home and Mercury is in detriment, where Gemini was the opposite. So Mercury and Jupiter have this kind of special relationship. And that's what the rulerships are based in too. It's about the relationships that ruling planets have to each other. So if you study rulership, understanding the sympathetic and antipathetic planetary pairings, those little couplets, can be really helpful. There's helpful techniques within that. Yeah. So it's mutable. Oh, that says mutable air. That's wrong. Sorry, I had to adjust some of these slides so I could cut a lot of stuff out. So I must have copied and pasted incorrectly. So it's mutable fire and onopheric, which means upward moving. All right. Our Sag peeps, Tina Turner, who's had her thighs insured, her legs. It's very Sag. Again, we're not talking about the physical or emotional pieces of the sign, but Sag is the legs, the thighs. Okay. And the glutamus maximus, the butt. All right. So let's talk about Cancer. Cancer, I feel all of these nostalgic pictures, right? Anyone have a Cancer in their lives, in their homes, right? Their mirrors are often adorned with lots of pictures of family and friends and good times. Um, Cancer is about feeling beneath the exterior layer, about going deeper. The season of Cancer, I like to start there. Let's start there. So the season of Cancer, it's the watery part of summer, right? Cancer is a water sign. So in Cancer season, which will be happening in about 30 days, Cancer season is the watery part of summer. So what's happening is there's monsoon rains in a lot of the world. Places that have mountain ranges, like here in the Pacific Northwest, it's the time that the watershed off the mountains is at its highest. So we have kind of the flooding of a lot of sandy rivers or dry rivers. They're all flooded. They're all growing all these new plants. There's a lot of new life happening. The Nile River would flood in Cancer season too. We have a lot of watery fruits and vegetables that come into harvest. It's the first harvest. So, it's cucumbers, it's melons, it's stone fruits, it's berries, right? So we've got a lot of, again, watery fruits and vegetables in the season of Cancer. Here in the US, it's the birth of our country. So there's a lot of like home or homeland associations with Cancer, the sign, in the season of Cancer. We might even see uh, family reunions and things like that. We're by water often. Okay, so Cancer is actually, let's start with home. So often people say Cancers are homebodies, which can be true, but Cancer is about sanctuary. It's about having a place where I feel safe, I feel guarded, I feel protected, I feel grounded, and I can rejuvenate and restore myself, which is not always a home. Not always a home. So Cancers and their reputation of being home bodies or homebound, again, is not necessarily always true. Cancers might find refuge in a library, on a tennis court, in an art studio, at a beach house, in a tree fort. There's many different places that we might feel that Cancerian need to be contained. Okay, contained. Cancer, Cancer and Capricorn are both emotionally, excuse me, they're not emotionally. Cancer and Capricorn are both past oriented, but in different ways. Cancer is emotionally past oriented, and Capricorn is a little bit different, and we'll get there. But both of them are honoring of the past, respectful of the past, noting the past, maybe following tradition in some way, which tradition does not necessarily mean value wise. It just means honoring tradition. So, if this is a silly example, but if a Cancer, someone with a lot of Cancer, their family celebrated Arbor Day by baking a bunch of cookies and singing songs about trees, then they're going to continue that tradition. There's an emotional satisfaction, there's an emotional need. There might even be a feeling of groundedness that happens by carrying on that tradition, right? I have a friend who has Venus in Cancer from high school, and she'll text me every year the day before Thanksgiving. Remember that time in 1997 that we went to the mall the day before Thanksgiving? Yes, I remember, because you'll never let it go. She's really relating to me by honoring the emotional past. She's like, remember that time we really connected at Pizza Hut? So, with Cancer, again, is that honoring of anniversaries, kissiversaries, sexiversaries, friendiversaries, familyversaries, jobiversaries. They're really, again, kind of marking those traditions, marking those initiations. Okay. Caretaking, safety oriented, the water heart. Cancer's lit up in the water heart, right? This is the watery encasement around the cardiac muscle. It's called the pericardium. And so they're lit up here. And Again, I don't have the physical or emotional slides today, but what I want to tell you is to look into the topic of energetic hygiene. This is the water-based psychic center, and it's where Cancer picks up a lot of emotional information that doesn't belong to itself. And that can lead to a whole host of challenges, right? Processing these, thinking it's yours, going through this whole internal excavation of emotions when it's not even this your shit that's sticking to you, right? um, I've learned a lot about water signs in general because it tends to be 100% of my clients, maybe 95. But again, energetic hygiene, I even wrote a book about it because it's just, I've learned so much about it from clients in the last 10 plus years. So energetic hygiene, really important to look at. Okay. Family group, friends as chosen family, clan oriented, a need for belonging. This is Cancer. Think of that crab or the glyph of Cancer. It's like an embrace, right? And actually, again, Cancer's lit up here in the heart, water heart, the kind of pericardium area. So hugging, oxytocin is ruled by Cancer, right? The biochemical that secretes when we hug or orgasm or nurse. We get oxytocin. So this is the Cancer kind of action, right? We've got like our little safe protected container, a little crab. And so we often put people into our little bubble, our little wall, and then nobody else can come in. That's actually a shadow quality of Cancer, is kind of controlling of the group, or unable to let new people into the group, right? We might be distrustful of new people, right? Okay. Um, Identity is wrapped in caretaking. That could be true of Cancer. We might hold on to the past, patterns, traditions, relationships. Um, if you're interested in plants, because I work with plants, pine and honeysuckle are two flower essences that work really well for this idea about the past and being past oriented. So honeysuckle is for when we might romanticize the past and want to go back to a particular time period, right? I'm like, oh, high school, everything is wonderful. Or, oh, the 90s, like the music and the movies and all that stuff. I miss it. I miss it. Um, Pine is for when we might vilify or demonize a certain time in our life. So it's kind of the opposite. So we might go, oh, high school, like that time was the worst, right? I had such a horrible time. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to know about it. But what Pine does is it helps us to see what was really wonderful about that time, right? The music that I might have loved, or things I found comfort in, or the friends I did have, or the experiences that were positive. Pine helps us to, again, kind of not vilify a particular time in the past. It helps us to open up to see what's wonderful about that. So honeysuckle and pine. Okay. Extreme emotional security, sensitivity to the outside world, moodiness, empathic sensitivity. Again, energetic hygiene. Check into this subject. I didn't like I said, I wrote a book about it, but it's not my term. So you'll still find a lot of information about that online. Controlling or emotionally manipulating of the group, the clan, the family, right? It's kind of like that. Maybe this is a stereotype. It's kind of like the mother where the child goes to college, right? The child moves out of the house, and then the mother's like, "You should come home for Thanksgiving. If you don't, it'll be, it could be grandma's last Thanksgiving. Like if you don't come home for Thanksgiving, it could be grandma's last." And you're like, "Mom, you've been saying that for 5 years." It's emotional control to get what we want, right? A Cancer might do that. It might, again, kind of work in the emotional realm to achieve a certain desired outcome. Okay. So here's our Cancer Cosmo Kitty, right? Knows you want tea before you know you want tea. The exaltation is Jupiter. Moon is the home. Mars is in fall, and the detriment is Saturn. It's cardinal water. It's initiating water, and it's codipheric, which means moving downwards. Okay. And our Cancer people. Wow. I can usually talk about Cancer for an hour. All the water signs. They're actually quite complex. Okay. All right, and for the sake of time, in the interest of time, we're going to move on to Capricorn. I utilize, look at this gorgeous Capricorn setting right here. Ugh, I love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. And of course, there are three types of stylized glyphs for Capricorn. That's why I have all three of those there for you. Practice that Cappy glyph. All right. So Capricorn is the season of winter. It's the start of winter, right? And we might think kind of more traditionally in the way that, again, we weren't working the fields. And so Capricorn season was a time in which maybe we're getting things done in the house, maybe we're more reflective, maybe we're journaling, maybe we're dreaming, maybe we're really looking at self, maybe we're really, again, kind of repairing relationship to self, repairing relationships to others. We might be in close quarter with others during Capricorn season. And in Capricorn season, we might have had to be really strategic about getting anything done if we had to leave the house. So what we see with Capricorns is that they are quite strategic, and they're really kind of artful of watching the signs, right? Of really noticing how they might achieve something very strategically. And so in this kind of olden days example, if we were to go to the village, which could be harrowing experience in its own right, like we might get trapped into a snowstorm. So if I had to go to the village, I might walk outside, I might notice the kind of clouds that are in the sky, I might notice how the wind is moving, right? Test it. I might notice if any animals are out. And so that speaks to the strategic nature of Capricorn, but also in Capricorn season, there's the least amount of plant life and animal life. So we're really working with what we see, what's tangible, what's right in front of us, Capricorn. And it might be why, Capricorn and Virgo are the two signs I see least in consultation and for students. Because, learning astrology, there might be a belief in like, yes, this tool works before I actually learn how this tool works or why this tool works or the inner workings of this tool. There might be a little bit of a hesitation for people who have a lot of Capricorn. They're like, what is this thing, right? I'm only going to use what's in front of me. They don't realize that astrology is a tool. And that Virgo also, same, right? I'm Virgo rising. It took me 15 years of studying astrology before I actually opened a practice because I had to see the pattern over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, and then I believed. So Capricorn is similar in some ways. So with Capricorn, what we see is order, reform, discipline, responsibility is a huge word for Capricorn. Same with Cancer. Both of them are about response and responsibility. So Capricorn is really oriented to taking up responsibility. We might see, again, a traditional nature, and tradition does not necessarily relate to values or political orientation. There might be conservation concerns for Capricorn, and also time-honored traditions. So similar with Cancer, Capricorn might really honor traditions, especially things that might be more long-lasting. The Astrology Bible by Judy Hall. It's a book that we give our students, and there's like a gift section for each sign. And so she's like, Capricorns love tanned leather books and vintage wine and vintage jewelry. And you're like, well, what do those all have in common? The thing that they all have in common is time. So there's a time kind of honored element in Capricorn. My clients who are Capricorns that do come and see me, some of them might be herbalists, right? And you're like, why are you an herbalist? What about herbalism interests you? Again, just asking people why they do the things they do. This is how you learn astrology. And they're like, oh, well, herbalism is a field that has existed for literally thousands of years. And you're like, oh, okay, great. They're really honoring this time-oriented tradition of herbalism. That's why they're herbalists. So Capricorn, again, really time-oriented, tradition honoring. All right. They're ambitious yet slow climbing and strategizing. They're masters of integrity and also of solitude. Like Capricorn's like, I can do it myself. Like I don't need anyone's help, which can be helpful. It can also be a hindrance for Capricorn, right? And Capricorn's looking to marriage one's nature with the public image. Presentation oriented. A lot of Capricorns have a lot of anxiety around how their interpersonal interactions might reflect on their reputation. So sometimes like Capricorns might find it stressful just doing everyday activities, maybe exhibiting less than desirable qualities, right? Maybe like doing something that they see as bending the rules or breaking the rules. They're like, oh my gosh, what if my work finds out? What if the world knows? What if someone exposes me on Twitter? So there's again a kind of um, personal nature that's really married to one's bigger kind of global reputation. Okay. All right. So the emotional nature of Capricorn, we might see excuse me, not the emotional nature, the shadow quality of Capricorn. We might see uh, uh, kind of an emotionally closed nature, a more reserved nature, a more hesitant nature. We might see inner dissatisfaction creates a need for validation and success in the outside world. One of my students who was a Cap stellium referred to herself as wearing an invisible crown, and I really loved that languaging for Capricorn. We often see Leo as being the one wearing the crown. They're like, look at me, I'm wonderful. And it's Capricorn that's really doing a lot of the work, but not getting recognized, right? We'll talk about Leo in just a moment and how it really differs from Capricorn, but we often see like CEO is given to Capricorn, and that might be true, but Capricorn is really the person who's doing all the work, and a CEO is really a figurehead, right? And so Capricorn like built Microsoft. It's not Bill Gates. It's like someone whose name we don't know, right? Capricorn is the one putting in all the work and building the structures and building everything. They're building the entire empire or operation. And so they're really wearing the invisible crown. Yeah. Unable to see possibilities, imagine what is not tangible. So again, thinking about the seasonal imprint of Capricorn, right? The least amount of plant and animals are visible. So we're really looking at like working with what we got. Jupiter was in Capricorn recently and was in Capricorn 12 years ago. And so both times Jupiter was in Capricorn, we were in a recession. So it was about doing more with less, right? About getting our needs met with less. There's a conservation energy with Capricorn. Okay, status driven, extreme need for merit or accolades, workaholism, extreme conservation. Those things can be true too. Okay. Mars is exalted, Saturn's at home, Jupiter is in fall, and the moon is in detriment. It's cardinal Earth, and it's katapheric, so downward moving. And here's our Capricorn Cosmo Kitty. I really want to give a lot of praise and recognition to all the Cappies out there, because Capricorn is, I think, the third sign that gets a lot of sign bashing or doesn't get the recognition that it really deserves. I think I have a little note here. Yeah, you are worth more than your productivity. There's a lot of capitalist values that are wrapped up in the sign of Capricorn. Capricorn's oriented to systems, so obviously the largest system that we are under is capitalism. So there's a lot of capitalistic pursuits that are then married with Capricorn. And so this is just an invitation to begin to kind of pull apart the Capricorn nature from capitalistic values. If you have a lot of Capricorn, that might be worth looking into. Okay, you are worth more than your productivity, damn it. And so lastly, our Cap people. Cappy cap, cap cap. Cappy cap, cap cap. All right, so moving on. What time is it? 40. Okay, we got 5 minutes for the next four signs. Leo. I will. Leo, the season of Leo midsummer. So this is when a lot of the world that goes to school year round, they have their summer break in Leo. It's their 30 days off. Of course, in the US, most of our schools are off for a longer period of time. But in the world, this is kind of a time of celebration, high summer. It's a time of expression, of play. The sunlight is very golden and orange. In my neighborhood, I live in a very dense neighborhood. And so Leo season is when it's like a party every night. People are on the porch. People are drinking wine and walking around. People are strumming guitars. People are on swings, play sets and things. So it's a time of play, expression, creativity, fun. And Leo is that. Leo is about giving expression to everything. giving expression to words, to movement, to inanimate objects, right? Leo is about living in the moment, basking in the sunshine, recognizing the light in self and others, lifting others up, reciprocating positive attention. So what can be true about Leo is they're like, I'm really great in these ways, but also what's true, and I don't think Leo gets enough credit for this, is that they are often like, you are really great at these things. Oh, that was so great. That was so wonderful. I love that about you. You took a shower today. Yay! Leo again is really celebratory about the small things in life, but again, can really easily shine that light on others too. And I think that's something that we miss a lot about Leo. They're really great at spotlighting self and others. Okay. I used to teach with a double Leo at PSA for most of the time we've been open. And so she also would really attribute all the time, meaning she'll say a quote and she'll be like, that was Moses Seargard the third. She'd say an idea and say, oh, that was Jeff Jower's idea. So really, again, giving proper attribution, really highlighting those people, very Leo-like. Okay. Also, everything is given form expression. I lived with a Leo rising. I taught with a Leo rising and sun. They kind of give uh, little personalities. They give expression to inanimate objects. So, both of them would see plants and they would be like, hey, plant, are you thirsty? And then this plant would talk. It would say, yes, I'm very thirsty. Oh, would you like some water? Yes, I would very much. Okay, here you go. Dun, 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 dun. Are you feeling much better now? Feeling much better now. It's very Leo, right? They give like voice to things that are voiceless. Expression to expression. Oh, excuse me. Okay. Expressions. Okay. So Shadow Leo, inability to share the spotlight with others, a burning desire to be noticed or praised or loved. We might see arrogance with Leo and a need to infuse melodrama into situations. Caroline Casey in Making the Gods Work for You, it's another first-year text that we have our students read. She talks about this idea of drama and melodrama. So I think in our culture, we kind of have the definitions of drama and melodrama confused. Often people confuse melodrama for drama. Drama is not inherently bad or challenging. Drama is what is interesting about being a human being in a body on Earth. It's like, conversations, it's conflict, it's joy, it's dance, it's laughter, it's hooking up with people, it's someone looking you up and down when you're walking down the street and you're like, oh, ooh, interesting. That's drama. It's just the interestingness of life, the zestfulness of life. Melodrama is what we often confuse drama for. Melodrama is the underbelly of drama. So Caroline Casey says, live drama, Leo, live drama or suffer melodrama. And melodrama is more of the slanderous, gossipy, I'm creating situations for my own entertainment, right? That's more melodrama behavior. So, if you have planets in Leo, you have a lot of Leo, it's really important for you to be dramatic. That's what's fun. That's what's fun about you. And you're noticing about what's fun about the earth, noticing what's fun about living life in a body. Drama versus melodrama. Okay. Like I said, we've only got about 5 minutes for each sign. So home, sun, Saturn, detriment. Fixed fire, and it's onopheric, which means moving up. Fire and air move up, water and earth move down. And our Leo people, and maybe take a screenshot or pause, pause your YouTube video if you need to look at this, but got to move on. So Aquarius, their ditty, I know. And so Aquarius, now we're moving into the polarity of, oh, no, actually, I'm sorry, we're here. Leo, Aquarius, Leo, Aquarius. These two signs are opposite of one another. They share the polarity of expression. Sometimes I call this the polarity of gifts. So Leo is like, I'm the gift, I'm the talent, look at me. And Aquarius has more of the orientation of we're the gift, we're the talent. Leo is about expression of self, and Aquarius is about expression of the group. right? So Aquarius is more group oriented, where Leo is more individual oriented. And the season of Aquarius is midwinter. So there's a holiday, cross-quarter holiday, um, Imbolc or Candlemas if you're Catholic. Lunar New Year is in Aquarius. Valentine's Day, if that's any information. Groundhog's Day, whatever that is. It's kind of a secular version of Imbolc. Um, but Aquarius is about, oh, I'm sorry, with Aquarius season 2, what we see is a lot of the yellows begin to pop up. So like Forsythia and Scotch broom and daffodil, crocus, a lot of the yellows start to pop up. Witch hazel, yeah, okay. Chinese paper lantern. Okay, moving on. So Aquarius is about responsibility to share their gifts for the benefit of society and humanity as a whole. Um, I know I'm talking about a Leo and Aquarius, but just to kind of back up a bit, Aquarius is Saturn ruled, Capricorn is Saturn ruled. So both of those signs are oriented to responsibility too, right? Capricorn is about responsibility to the past, and Aquarius is about responsibility to the future. Capricorn is about honoring systems of the past and traditions, and Aquarius is about foreseeing new systems, right? Creating new systems and structures for the future. So kind of similar but different. Both of them are Saturn ruled again. So Aquarius, we might see an interest in building for the future in whatever the way that might be. That might be for my family, that might be for my religion, that might be for my art, that might be politically the case. But again, kind of future minded. All right. Aquarius, future planning, right? Visioning, connected to the collective conscious. Stephen Forrest gives this idea about Aquarius that I like to drop in The Inner Sky, which is expression of truth no matter the consequence. This is what he says. And I love that because Aquarius and Leo, again, oriented to expression. Aquarius might kind of have the unpopular opinion, right? Saying something that needs to be said. That might again be upsetting, or things that people don't want to hear. So sometimes like Aquarius has the experience of even being the scapegoat, because they're the one bringing they can kind of see in what ways, future minded, they're future minded, they can kind of see in which ways something needs to be corrected now or addressed now in order to avoid a future interruption, a future something, right? And so they'll bring it up, and then they might be punished for that. Expression of truth no matter the consequence. Okay. Going to keep going here. So shadow Aquarius, we might see religious fanaticism, bigotry, xenophobia as a way to help the world. Again, they're kind of future minded. So they're thinking about how they're going to create a new world, right? And so sometimes people have the idea of creating a new world that might exclude other groups. There's this idea that I see a lot in social media that people assume that Aquarius is very liberal, or very democratic, or very radical leaning in again, a kind of progressive way, which is not the case. Everyone's kind of like, I can't wait for the age of Aquarius. Everyone's going to be free. I don't know if that's the case. Right? Like, think about very Aquarian figures like Sarah Palin, Dick Cheney, Ronald Reagan, people who had very futuristic ways of excluding, right? So Aquarius is about my vision for the future, but it's not necessarily one political ideology or another. Okay. We might see perfectionism to the vision, right? So Aquarius might have this idea for the future, and if it doesn't quite go the way that they expected, they might even abandon the idea. I don't have time to give you examples of this, so you're just going to have to take my word. But if they have an idea again for the future, and then they're working through that, and it becomes maybe a ballot measure that then is a tiny piece to the step that they were thinking, they might go, I'm not going to vote for that at all, because it's not the original vision. Whereas Leo, again, really celebrates those small wins or small steps. Aquarius might really crave the idea, the vision, the thing to be the thing that they originally envisioned. Okay. Detached, uncompassionate, that might be true of Aquarius too. Okay. Rulership, nothing is in exaltation or fall. The sun is in detriment. So again, the sun, it's just the sun is, about the individual and the ego, and a sign that's about the group, about others. So that's why it's said to be acting differently. Okay. Same with sun in Libra, which is in fall. It's a planet about self and a sign about others. And our Aquarius people, I have 8 minutes to do 2 more signs. Oh, like I said, this is just an introduction. There's lots of resources to learn more about signs. So Virgo, isn't that so beautiful in Virgo? I love it. I serve. Looks like a record, like an album cover. All right, Virgo. So late summer, this is the season of harvest. This is when we're gathering, collecting, categorizing. I'm like, look at this apple. It's not ready yet. That apple is ready. This apple on the ground is mead because it's rotting. We're going to use it to make alcohol. We're going to store this apple. We're going to take this apple to dinner. We're going to give this to the community. There's a lot of, again, kind of categorizing, discriminating, separating that happens in Virgo season. So this is what Virgo does. The ability to analyze, discriminate, disseminate, distill, organize, and simplify. Virgo is about finding meaning in service. It's efficient, tedious, detail-oriented. It makes sense of the world through patterns and systems. And there's something I like to drop in here and talk a little bit about, but I probably don't have a lot of time. But it's the idea of Virgo the Virgin, the constellation of Virgo, the maiden, which is an idea that predates Judeo-Christian ideas of virgin. Virgo the Virgin actually relates to the idea of the Vestal Virgins, the temple priestesses who were called to be of service to the community. And when they finished the contract in the temple, then the community would take care of the temple priestess. So there's the energy of serving, of giving of self, but then also being of one's own sovereign being, right? If I served in the temple, and again, this is very patriarchal, this idea still, but then I was not the property or contract of a husband or a father. So I was of my own authority. So Virgo the Virgin is not about necessarily chastity or purity, although that can be true, but this idea is also related to the temple priestesses being of service to the community. Okay. The shadow qualities of Virgs, the desire for cleanliness, virginal reputation, prudishness. Again, that can be true. Self-sacrificing, martyrdom, equity-focused. Perfectionism may plague thoughts about self, about the body, immobilized action. Extreme criticism of self and others, difficult being the center, constant need to improve. So also what can be really fun, I'm a Virgo rising, I'm very Virgo. One thing I really love is, kind of critiquing. I find that to be such a fun thing to do. So sometimes, going to a restaurant and saying like, oh, it'd be great if like this were over here and like the lighting were like this, or, oh, here's a typo on the menu. That might seem like for Virgo, for others actually, they might feel like Virgo's not having a good time, but that actually is very fun for me. So I love actually being with like another Virgo where that's the game that we play, is like we're improving. And it doesn't mean that we're not having a good time, but that's just like what the eye is trained to do, right? Virgo's like looking for ways things can be improved. And can have a lot of self-judgment about that too, right? Like we know that we are imperfect beings. And so Virgo might suffer from a lot of, again, ideas around perfectionism of self. All right, so the rulership, Mercury is at home and exalted, Venus is in fall, and Jupiter is in its detriment. And Venus in, well, okay, actually I won't have time to go into that. Look up Venus in fall in Virgo. You'll find some information about related to, ideas about Venus. Venus is expected to be in relationship with others, and Virgo is a sign about being in relationship to itself, right? Self-sovereignty, self-sufficiency. So Venus in Virgo is about building a relationship with self, and that's really important to Venus in Virgo. It doesn't mean Venus in Virgo doesn't have relationships, but it's one way that we can view the fall of Venus. Again, it's just acting differently. So it's not going to get validation from others. It's building validation in self, Venus and Virgo. So relating to self first and then others. Okay. Here's our Virgo people. And again, we'll have to move on quickly. So pause this, screenshot it, come back to it, because we've got to talk about Pisces. I believe when I fall in love again, it'll be forever. Stevie Wonder, I believe. Okay, so Pisces, I believe. Pisces, the season of Pisces is late winter. So this is when a lot of the pastels come up, including the sky is very pastel, pink and blue. A lot of pastel flowers, plum, cherry, crocus, tulips. A lot of those flowers come up in Pisces. Also, Pisces season, at least here in the Pacific Northwest, often it'll be sunny and raining at the same time. So there's this very kind of magical quality that happens in Pisces season. Also, that sunny and rain creates tons of rainbows, just thousands. They're even on the sidewalk. You're like walking in rainbows here. So it creates that kind of very dreamlike seasonal expression. All right. So Pisces is about what, Pisces dissolves what separates. It's about what connects us into one. So Virgo is about what separates, and Pisces is about how we are unified or what we have in common. And both are good and bad, I guess. There's no, again, there's nothing bad about what separates. Like there's actually really useful things about noticing how we're separated, and there's really useful things about noticing how we're connected. Virgo, not Virgo, but Pisces. Well, actually, we'll say this: Virgo and Pisces, both of them in some ways feel burdened by being in a body. Virgo is so oriented to work that it's really important that Virgo makes sure it has time to relax and do things in which it can escape. The same is true for Pisces. Pisces, in some ways, has a hard time being in a body. And so it needs to make sure that it is creating time and space to float about, to be kind of out of time, but safely, so that it's tethered to the earth. It can come back to the earth, because Pisces has a hard time being on earth, and Virgo has a hard time letting go. So that both of them can really be helped by having experiences in which they are in fantasy or in creativity or in flow, or this kind of Kairos experience that I talk a lot about. I teach a class about Kairos at Portland State University. It's a kind of time orientation. I'm happy to talk at length about it. Contact me if you're curious. But that kind of Kairos experience, timelessness, is very important for Pisces. Otherwise, if we're not doing that, we'll often do more escapist behaviors in a way that can be detrimental to our health or to our relationships, right? So things like a lot of television watching, or partying, or sex, or drugs, or alcohol, or maybe even working a lot, right? Things that might, again, be detrimental to health or relationships. So making sure we're building in time to escape is very important for both signs. Both signs. All right. Pisces is also about the imagination realm, right? Working in timelessness is a way in which Pisces connects with that imagination. It's really important. Running psychic information through the auric field. This is the esoteric organ of Pisces. It's the auric egg. So we're getting in a lot of information from people, from places, from ghosts, from vintage jewelry, from meals that we're eating in which the preparer is angry, right? So energetic hygiene, again, I could talk about that for an hour, but look that up because that's really important for Pisces too. Okay. What can be hard for Pisces is boundaries, right? See this man, bad boundaries. God, I can't even look at that picture. Um, boundaries can be porous. So grounding, again, energetic hygiene can be really important, and practicing good boundaries can be really important too, for Pisces. So saying no when we mean no, keeping people, not doing things that we don't want to do, etc. You can look up a lot of information about boundary building, but it's important for Pisces. Pisces can be sensitive to vibrations, informations, everything, right? Everything. So really guarding, protecting, grounding, scanning, doing a lot of these energetic hygiene techniques, to make sure that we're tethered, we're grounded. Yeah. Okay. Something that Stephen Forrest talks about in The Inner Sky is the fish adrift, following the paths of least resistance. What might be true, right? Like a Pisces might be like, oh, I guess I'm studying this now. Oh, I guess I'm in this relationship now. Oh, I guess I'm working here now, which can be true. Again, Pisces might not be as willful as the next sign, Aries. But I don't think that's necessarily bad, right? Stephen Forrest talks about it as being a bad thing. But that also might be how Pisces kind of navigates the life. It's a little more intuitive than some of the other signs, right? So Pisces might kind of fall into this job, but it might be the right action at the right time, if that makes sense. So just being really kind of intuitively minded or intuitively discerning about some of those things that we might fall into as Pisces. Um, um, we don't want to kind of live our lives in the driver's seat necessarily, but again, we might be invited to do things more intuitively. So just noticing when that comes up in your life, when you're kind of being the fish adrift, or when you're actually falling into the right place at the right time. Okay. What also might be true is that Pisces are really shapeshifters. Gemini is a shapeshifter through information. Pisces is a shapeshifter through that auric field. So auric field manipulation is something that Pisces is really great at, right? Pisces can kind of change the auric field to be like bark, to be a certain color, to be shimmery, to be invisible. This is that organ that they're really working through. Yeah, okay. Pisces is another sign that I can talk about for a whole hour, but we won't because we're almost done. Venus is exalted, Jupiter's at home, Mercury's at fall and detriment. One of my students who has Mercury in Pisces described Mercury, their experience of Mercury in Pisces was like pushing an ocean of information through a straw. Right. And so Mercury in Pisces is said to be in detriment because it kind of has a lot of extrasensory information and might struggle in putting that into a sentence. One of our co-teachers, Amanda Moreno, has Mercury in Pisces too. And so she says that like the way in which she constructs sentences, usually she thinks about word choice and like the way that sentences feel, like they have to have a certain kind of rhythm to it. So it's very Mercury Pisces to be so concerned with how a sentence feels, right? How the communication feels. It's very beautiful, actually. And that says mutable earth, but it's mutable water. Sorry. Like I said, I was kind of copying and pasting in order to kind of cut these slides to make them a lot shorter. So I must have copied and pasted wrong. But mutable water. Okay. And it's coniferous. So here's our Pisces people. Oh, I'm going over by 4 minutes. Sorry. Okay. And we'll just pause for 1 second more. So you can pause this or you can take a screenshot of it. Our Pisces people. All right. And then I'm sorry I kept you 5 minutes. I'm a Virgo rising and a Sun Saturn, so usually I'm right on time. So I apologize. But hopefully you enjoyed the extra 5 minutes. I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to Stormy and to Sasha for inviting me. Again, if you're curious, you can learn more about me at cosmophilia.com. You can also learn about me and the school and all of our teachers and everything we have going on at pdxastro.org. And again, our Instagram is pdxastro. I've been JP Hawthorne. You've been a great virtual audience. Yeah, let's talk later. Come hang out with us sometime. Okay, love to see you. Okay, I'm pretty sure I'm just supposed to leave. I think Stormy said. Okay. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here. Good luck in your astro studies. Keep studying the signs. Lots of ways to do that. Again, through food, music, movement, art, storytelling. Yeah, not just intellectual learning. Yeah. Okay. All right. Bye.